afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. So this is kind of easing to a topic where we're going to be talking about understanding the ego. And to be honest, I would definitely want to create a subtopic slash maybe sub channel about this topic because it's very important, and in my opinion it's the greatest block to becoming part of flow. It's the greatest block in terms of transcendence, and it's the greatest block in terms of understanding your spiritual self. Okay, it's the ego. And ego is a word that gets thrown around quite a lot. We think, oh yeah, he's very confident in himself, he must have an ego. But we don't understand that the even the sussing out of the ego is the ego. You know what I mean? It's a relationship it's a relationship within a certain frequency in which physical things matter, appearances matter, and you think that you are yourself, if you know what I mean. You think that you are your thoughts in a sense, but you're not. So in this video, I want to talk about, in terms of one way which I find which could help understanding the ego in terms of separating it from your spiritual self, is by giving your ego a personality. Okay, for example, for me, I will give my ego, you know what I'm saying, I will recognize it. Well, I don't actually have a specific name in mind for it at the moment, but I will have a name for it soon enough. But this is what we're talking about. We want to personalitize the ego to understand what traits it has. And again, this is all quite individual to each own's person understanding of their own ego. But if we're going to talk about my ego, for example, I would say that my ego consists of someone that thinks that they're above the people that they have around them. Whether that person knows it or not, my ego doesn't care. It's so firm in the belief that it's better than everyone else, and it shows that through the things it does, in which will be intentional to show that to that person without having to directly say it. That's my ego. For example, my ego is at its loudest when, you know, when I'm against someone and I'm whipping them in FIFA or something, and they're just giving bare verbal. I don't say nothing, but in my head, I'm just like, yeah, I'm just so much better than you, you pussy. That's my ego, okay? And yeah, there are worse egos out there, for sure. My ego is not the worst, but that is how my ego shows itself, in like a cocky guy, you know what I mean? And again, my ego doesn't really feel the need to be, you know what I'm saying, it hides itself from the world in the sense that, because it knows that it's not as powerful as it thinks, so it's not out loud and it's confident in terms of, I mean, it's not out loud about its confidence, but it's definitely still there, and it's definitely still loud in my mind, okay? And it applies to a lot of things in the way it acts, okay? And my spiritual nature is a bit different, because my spiritual nature, which I understand and know, is definitely more of a teacher. It still understands the knowledge that I have within me, but it wants to share the knowledge. You know, it wants to help other people. It wants to teach other people things, and it doesn't want to just show the power in which my ego does. And that's the difference between my ego and my spiritual self, which I call the avatar. I know what I call my spiritual self. My ego is, you know what it is? I don't even want to name my ego itself, to be honest. He who shall not be named. Maybe we can think of an abbreviation for that. But that's in the understanding of my ego, okay? My ego is definitely, he's a brat. You know what I'm saying? I still kind of rate him, you know, because he's got me. When I've been in dark places, you know, it's been there for me when I've been in the dark places, because when I needed that confidence to know, but so is my spiritual self. But at the same time, the ego definitely did parry a bit of that in terms of bringing up who I am today. But, you know, it was never a permanent solution, okay? And again, for me, my main thing isn't necessarily shutting up the ego, but it's understanding who it is, and I want to understand what sort of relationship it wants to have with my spiritual self. But my spiritual self has to be at the forehand. I hear intruders. But yeah, my spiritual self has to be at the forehand. I no longer want my ego to be at the forehand. So I want my spiritual self to give my ego orders. You know what I mean? But then, yeah. So this is a good way in understanding, you know, the difference between ego and spiritual self, okay? And I want to show you guys something, because, you know, like, I just want to show you exactly how, like, growth in a way works. Because when I was first trying to understand this stuff, I wrote this. Did I date this? I even dated this. I wrote this on the 25th of the 9th of September, okay? It's mirrored, so you can't really read much, but it was like a little thing I wrote about ego versus confidence, okay? I'm not gonna read this all out to you, but it was me trying to come to understand ego versus confidence. And again, the confidence is now what I define as the spiritual self. But at this time, I defined it as confidence. But you see, this is what growth is, you know? And again, I wanted to show you this, not to read this to you and to make you understand, but just understanding the importance of these phases, you know? And why you should really mark these phases, have evidence of these phases. So in that way you can look back and understand how you grow. And again, this definitely inspires me to write more, because that was really, like, I haven't even read that back yet, but I already know where my mind was. I remember, it's like muscle memory, okay? And obviously I'll have these videos to look back on for a long time, I'm sure, unless YouTube just, you know, crashes down, and then I'll have no. But then, to be fair, it will be on this phone, but it's not the same because it doesn't have titles and stuff, you know what I mean? But yeah, this is an introduction to the topic of the ego versus the spiritual self, okay? And understanding the spiritual self and becoming in line with the spiritual self. So we'll call this bracket SS, okay? Spiritual self. That's what this part is. It's not necessarily blueprint, because again, blueprint is more about way of life and interaction. But it's still an underlying part of blueprint. But yeah, this is the introduction to that. I should probably put these in playlists, innit? Got Cocoa Vaseline. Very lovely. I took this out of someone's car. I really like this shirt as well, by the way. I haven't worn this before, not properly anyway. But I felt really comfortable in this shirt today, even though it was quite hot outside. But yeah, man. Introduction to the spiritual self.